Terrorism, Nonproliferation, and Trade is recognized.
I want to identify myself with the comments of the ranking member, particularly his recognition of Secretary Clinton's service to our country over the last 4 years. I want to identify myself with the comments of the gentleman from New York, particularly his call for us to rise above partisanship. We're now focused on diplomatic security. We've lost 11 diplomats in the 10 years before Benghazi, and our focus on diplomatic security was modest. But now it becomes the preoccupation of this committee and a preoccupation of foreign policy, those concerned with foreign policy nationwide. Why now? Well, partly because this time we lost an ambassador and a great man. But mostly it's because now Benghazi is not just a loss of diplomats, we've lost 11 before, but because now there's partisan advantage to be sought by one side or the other. This incident in Benghazi was important, but is it really more important than the North Korean nuclear program? Is it really more important than many of the other subjects that have not been the subject of so many hearings of this committee? We've now decided to focus on diplomatic security in part because we can blame one party or the other. We can blame the State Department for not allocating its resources to diplomatic security or blame the Republican Congress for not appropriating enough. We should do more for diplomatic security. The State Department should follow its own procedures, and we haven't done so. But we'd like to believe in a world that is subject somehow to our control, that if we just do the right thing, everything will turn out right. This is not the case. We are not that powerful, and the world is not made up that way. The fact is that bad things are going to happen to good people even if we are prudent and careful. And ultimately, the security of our diplomatic personnel depends not on our own actions, but on the host country. Ambassador Burns, just for illustration here, even if we had twice the size of the diplomatic security detail, can you be certain that our ambassador would have survived?
I'd just make two comments, Mr. Sherman. First, the security of our diplomats overseas has been a preoccupation of the Department of State throughout the 30 years I've served in the Foreign Service, and it is a priority. We clearly fell down on the job with regard to Benghazi, but we need to re-energize our efforts and be relentless in implementing the recommendations that are made in this accountability.
Ambassador, if you could just comment on the question.
The second,
if we had doubled the security effort there.
The Accountability Review Board addressed the issue. It talked about two areas of inadequacy. One of them was staffing, and in the Accountability Review Board report, they indicate that it's not certain that that one or two additional diplomatic security agents would have made a difference in the outcome. So I think I
want to get into some other issues. Obviously, the real responsibility for this heinous crime is on the perpetrators, but a big chunk of the responsibility is on the Libyan government, a government that never purged itself of its jihadist elements, a government that viewed Gaddafi as the enemy, but doesn't necessarily view the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group as the enemy, doesn't wage war against Ansar al-Sharia. This is the government upon whom our diplomats' lives are dependent. We have a tendency in this country to view everything as good guy and bad guy. So since Gaddafi was the bad guy, in his last few years, perhaps not as bad, since the State Department, we blocked it here, wanted to provide U.S. taxpayer money to charities controlled by Gaddafi's children. He had gotten a little better. But we want to cast things as good guy, bad guy, and so since Gaddafi was the bad guy, we want to view the Libyan government as entirely the good guys. The fact is, this is a government that is a coalition that includes, or at least countenances, some of the most evil jihadist elements imaginable. Ambassador Burns, did the Libyan government allow us, our security detail traveling from Tripoli to Benghazi, to take weapons with them, or did they have to rely on the limited weapons that were available to them in Benghazi?
Mr. Sherman, this is on the night of September 11th?
This is when the ambassador flew from Tripoli to Benghazi, which I believe was a
I
day.
don't know the answer to that question. I can get it for you.
Please do get that, because this is a government that would this has the Libyan government restricted the number of security personnel that we can have on at our diplomatic missions?
I don't know if there are any particular restrictions, and in the Accountability Review Board report, the areas of inadequacy that are identified don't have to do with Libyan government restrictions. They have to do with judgments that weren't made about increasing the number of staffing.
Okay. I'll ask you to simply answer for the record, but I believe that the Libyan government has not granted us the right to use our Air Force over their airspace to defend our diplomats in the future. Most governments wouldn't, but here's a government that can't control its own territory. And as a final comment, I'll point out that the rebels in Syria include some excellent human beings and also include some elements that are just as bad as those who attacked us in Benghazi. And we should be careful that just because Assad's a bad guy, that doesn't mean all of his enemies are good. I yield back.
Thank you very much.